Hi, and welcome to Haunted AF, the podcast of real ghost stories told by real people. We are your hosts. I'm Julie Fisk.
And I'm Rebecca Black.
And we've got a special surprise for everybody this week. We found Derek Hayes from the Monsters Among Us podcast recently when he shared a reel on Instagram that looked so much like a video that we shared back in the fall.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yep, we reached out for a chat, and this man brought his A game of spooky stories. They're amazing.
Yep, including one that is now our all-time favorite in the pantheon of freaky stories that we have shared. You have to stick around to the end for that one. But before that, though, we need to thank our newest patron, Jessica Moat. Thank you so much. It's only $5 a month to become a patron, and you can get years of exclusive content over there, as well as all the episodes early and ad-free. All of that is at patreon.com/hauntedaf.
We're also going to do something a little different next week. I don't know if you realized it, but we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of the COVID shutdown.
How has it been 5 years
Isn't
already?
that wild? That was a huge time for us because everybody was stuck in their houses and sending us scary stories. In fact, we got some of our favorites in the first few months of COVID, and we thought it would be a good time to reshare those.
We were still in the early phases of the podcast game at that point, though, so we weren't posting YouTube videos, pre-games, or even the companion blogs. That means that next week will be audio only. Sorry about that, but everything else will return on March 20th.
Yeah, just pretend like you're back in, 2018 or something, where you just listen to podcasts.
Yeah, right. It was just the original podcasting.
Yeah.
No video, no nothing, just voices.
OGP.
Yeah.
So excited to be joined today by Derek Hayes, host of the Monsters Among Us podcast, also Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught on Tape. He's been telling scary stories on his podcast since 2016, so I know you have loads of them. Welcome to Haunted AF, Derek Hayes. Woo! Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. We've actually been trying to set this up for like a couple of months. Yeah. So thank you so much. And we actually... Well, we found you because of your podcast, but you came to our attention recently because on Instagram you shared a video that was very similar to something that we got from someone completely different. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we have so many things we want to ask you.
First, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Sure. Well, it's a call-in show, which is kind of odd for a podcast, but essentially it's like a voicemail show. It's not really like I don't talk to the callers that call in. They leave a voicemail. They tell their story in their own words. We edit it down to make it sound great. It's the best call you've ever heard. We throw it up on the air, and I do a little commentary about it. We compare it to historical cases. We compare it to other calls we've received over the years, that sort of thing. And we just have a good time. We share, like 15 calls an episode, something like that. So it covers the gambit from Bigfoot, UFOs, to ghosts, psychic ability, just anything strange and unusual, really.
Which is right up our alley. In fact, you inspired us with your 1-800 number when I saw that.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm trying to use the same system, but I'm stupid, and it's very hard for me to set things up. So we're still in the process of that. First of all, look at that hat, Monsters Among Us with Mothman on it.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have that available in an online store?
Yeah, it's in our shop at our website, monstersamonguspodcast.com.
Since your podcast is it's Monsters Among Us, even though you cover all kinds of topics, I want to start with Monsters Among Us. Do you feel it's possible that there might be actual monsters like living in human skins among us? Like we've heard about the whole lizard people thing for a million years. Do you think there is any possibility for that? And for the record, like Rebecca and I joke around about a lot of things, but we also try to leave a lot of space for anything being possible.
No, I think the answer is 100% yes. It just depends on what those things are. Not every single paranormal story can be true. In fact, most of them aren't. They're, misidentifications, they're hoaxes or psychotic episodes. There's all sorts of reasons that people could see something strange, but there is that small, 2-3% that it's got to be something else. And, that could be Sasquatch. I've seen some videos out there that are kind of convincing, and I've heard some stories, certainly on my show, that if the person's not lying, they're certainly convinced themselves that they saw something. And then you look at our oceans. The oceans are basically unexplored, especially the depths of the ocean. So who knows what might be down there? They just recently really discovered the giant squid. What was that, like 20, 30 years ago, something like that? It hadn't been that long ago that this 60-foot creature was swimming around down there and nobody knew about it.
Literally like a monster, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. This thing has eyes the size of a dinner plate. So that kind of gives you an idea how big it is.
What was that fish that they just found that they've only had 2 pictures like ever of it?
Oh, I didn't hear about that one.
Oh
But
my gosh, look it up. It looks like a monster. It's tiny though.
I know
Oh, wow.
the pictures of him, it's like some sort of deep water angler. And the photos were like, oh my gosh. But then when you saw the image of the guy who actually took the photo and you see this teeny tiny looking little goldfish, you're like, oh, that's not nearly as scary as I thought it was. Well, Derek, back to Bigfoot. This whole theory that Bigfoot is kind of an interdimensional traveler, that maybe that's why people have these very assumingly real encounters with him, but then you never find Bigfoot bones, you never find dead ones, like only blurry videos. What do you think about that theory?
Well, it's certainly a good way to explain away all those issues that you just brought up. Where are the bodies? Why haven't we hit one with a car or something like that? If they are interdimensional and just zipping in and out of our existence, that would certainly make it hard for us to find them. And there is a little bit of evidence that sort of supports that. There are a handful of sightings of this creature that also coincide with UFOs or bright lights, or sometimes they're seen carrying like a ball of light in their hand. Which kind of lends to that a little bit, that maybe they came from somewhere else, or maybe they have a higher intelligence than we thought they did. They're not just a stinky ape out in the woods,
Right.
The way I look at this, it's not Bigfoot's real, Bigfoot's fake. It's not as black or white as that. It's case by case, basically. So somebody tells me a story, I'm like, I don't know if I buy that story. And somebody tells me another one, I'm like, well, it had to have been something. They had to have seen something. There's footprints they collected. There's a swatch of hair that they caught, or whatever. There's some sort of evidence there that suggests that whatever it was they saw was something living. Whether or not it's a Bigfoot, I don't know, but something alive and well out there in the woods.
So I feel like that same theory sort of can be applied to like the cryptids that we hear about, right? Like, why haven't we found bones or scales or, whatnot? But are there any cryptids that you're like, yes, this guy, he is 100% real?
Well, there's a sea monster off the coast of California here, all the way up to Alaska, essentially, called Cadborosaurus. And it got its name because it was first seen in Cadboro Bay, I believe, and I can't remember where that is. I want to say it's off the coast of Vancouver somewhere. Well, this is like a 40-foot long snake-like creature with a horse head, and people have seen it all over the place. And in fact, in the 30s, a bunch of whalers caught a whale, butchered it, and when they opened the stomach up, one of these things fell out of it. So they packed it up and they sent it down to California to have some sort of biologist look at it or something. And as they always do, the crate ended up missing and they've never found it again. So there's a couple pictures of this thing, but that's it. And it looks like a camel, basically on a sea serpent's body.
Is there any possibility that it was a hoax, like something that somebody pieced together?
It could have been. Yeah, it certainly could have been. But it does fall in line with all the sightings that people have seen of this creature and all the reports that people have made. The description was right down to the camel-shaped face or the horse-shaped face.
Ew!
It's whatever they made it out of. If it was some sort of hoax, it was like 5 or 6 different animals that they used to put this thing together.
Which is pretty fascinating in itself.
Yeah,
Like,
and gruesome.
I feel like that's a lot of work to try to fool somebody, right? Like, you got to go get 12 different bodies and then piece them all together. It's too much.
For the 30s, I mean, why would you do that? There's no video out there. The news isn't going to come by. YouTube's not going to put it up there.
Right.
You might get a picture in the newspaper. Is it worth all that work? It's a good question.
When you think about like the oceans, they're so deep. There's so much we don't know. It does seem possible that there are things down there that we just haven't seen.
And things that have existed once and are thought to be extinct, but maybe they're not extinct,
Right.
A great example of that would be the coelacanth, which is a giant fish. It's like a prehistoric fish, basically. It sort of walks on the bottom of the ocean there. And for 65 million years, people thought that it was extinct, out with the dinosaurs. And then in 1933, I want to say, one was caught off the coast of South Africa. And ever since then, people have realized they're still down there. They didn't go extinct after all. And these are big fish, 6-foot-long fish.
We've heard so many ghost stories, so many Bigfoot stories, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think those really scare. I'm not scared of a ghost, but I am terrified of the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, you should be.
Well, it's like
Definitely should be.
There was years ago, Shark Week, they did a whole thing on the megalodon and tried to pretend like it was real. Do you remember that? It was a fake documentary. My dumbass watched it and thought it was real. And I have been ruined forever. So since you do take calls from your listeners, what's the coolest cryptid story that you've gotten from one of your listeners?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a tough question. I'm going to cheat and tell you a couple different things.
Please do.
Since we're talking about the ocean, Recently, I've been getting reports of a mermaid. It's not the Disney mermaid. It's kind of a gruesome looking thing. It kind of looks like Voldemort with a fishtail.
Ooh.
All the calls seem to come from the same part of the country, the Gulf of, or the coast of Texas there, in the Gulf of Mexico.
We can just call it the Gulf.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Gulf of
well, I was trying to
Buc-ee's.
think of exactly where it was, but it's off the coast of Texas, specifically where these things are being seen. I think I have 3 or 4 different calls, and I've read a few other reports from outside sources of this creature being in this area. Now, there are creatures that might be able to look like this. When I first played the call, I thought, there's a creature called the blanket octopus that has, as all octopi do, they have the ability to essentially shapeshift. They can look like almost anything.
Oh, that's so cool.
And the blanket octopus has these long frills that hang off of them and these long tentacles that hang down. So I was thinking maybe they saw a human and they're trying to replicate what a human looks like. So that was wild. And then all of a sudden I start getting all these other calls and I'm thinking, either there's one really talented blanket octopus out there, there might be something else going on here.
You're blowing my mind right now.
It's going to get worse because to answer your question about the scariest cryptid that I've heard of, there's a call called the Moose Lady. And it came in last year sometime. It was on our best of over New Year's. We do a best of episode every New Year's.
That's a great episode. I was listening to that not long ago. It was really good.
Oh, maybe you heard this one then. So this took place in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And there was a lady named Kate. She was walking her dog down along, I can't remember what the river is there in town, but she was walking her dog during the pandemic, so there was nobody around. And she sees an older lady carrying a suitcase up from the river into like a grove of trees. And as she gets closer, she sees the woman's all hunched over and dragging this large box-shaped suitcase. And she can see that the woman's blind. Her eyes are all covered over. And her dog starts to kind of go bananas. I don't want to go by this lady, trying to get away from her. And as she's watching the old lady walk uphill, suddenly she morphs into a gigantic moose. The suitcase turns into a moose. She turns into a moose. It's just a big moose that goes crashing through the trees, sees her, and starts to come after her.
Oh.
Well, this is where it gets really crazy. So she freaks out naturally, drops the dog. The dog takes off too. So she's scrambling up the hill trying to get away from it. And I guess a trucker just happened to be driving by and saw all this go down.
No.
Stops his truck and tells her, like, get away. I'm going to try to block this thing with my truck to keep it from getting to you. So he's making all these maneuvers, laying on his horn, revving his engine, and she's scrambling up the hill trying to get to her apartment. So this all takes place over like 10 minutes, and she's just frantic. And Moose Lady is hot on her trail. We don't know whatever happened, with the moose, with the lady. It was described that she crashed through a bunch of trees and broke the trees off as she ran through. So I had a bunch of listeners from that area like, well, I'm going to go check this out. And sure enough, they sent me pictures of all these broken trees in this exact same spot that she said this happened. And it gets even crazier. This year, maybe late last year, I got another call from right down the road of almost the exact same thing. This couple was walking along the beach, Lake Michigan, I think, one of the Great Lakes up there. And they heard a commotion in the water, and they saw this dog-looking creature run out of the water, and it kind of shape-shifted as it came out. And it went into the beach, and they were smart enough to get out of there real quickly. But whatever it was, wasn't a single form. It shaped between a person, a dog, some sort of hybrid. It wasn't a werewolf, essentially. They described it as something else, maybe a moose even.
Moose Lady might have a family.
Maybe, yeah. There's a whole clan of them up there.
Her husband.
So when the trucker stopped, he only saw the moose. He didn't see the transformation, correct?
We don't know because I've reached out trying to find this trucker, trying to get an interview from him, and apparently he's not a listener because I haven't heard from him. But the way Kate describes it, I don't know that he saw the moose and was trying to keep the moose away from her, or if he saw the whole thing go down. If I had to guess, I'd say he saw the whole thing go down based on his reaction and the way she described it in her story.
How often do you get those types of stories that where it's like a one-off, we've never heard of this type of thing before? Because
all the time.
That's incredible.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
We don't get a ton of cryptic stories. We
True.
get Bigfoot. We've gotten Bandage Man.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, we've gotten Puckwudgies, but yeah, we don't
The
get
Jersey Devil.
Jersey Devil.
Oh, nice.
Yes, we did have a mer person story recently.
Yeah.
I think where one
Is
of
it
our
in Texas?
no, it was in the Florida Panhandle. So yeah,
that's right in the same area.
So right in the same
interesting.
area.
What else are you doing? You're working on a documentary? Is this what I've heard?
Yeah, the documentary's finished. It was released last year, yeah. You can find it on Tubi, you can find it on Amazon Prime, or you can go to BragoTriangle.com. It's a documentary about a area of high strangeness my partner and I found while we were, out looking around for subject matter. And it's a huge state park out there. It's called Anza Borrego Desert State Park. It's like the size of Rhode Island. So this is a massive piece of land. But there's all sorts of stuff going on out there. There's like a skinny Bigfoot that people are seeing. They call it the Borrego Sandman. He kind of looks like an NBA player. He's kind of wiry and tall and skinny. And they see him all over the place. And it's weird, as we got in there, we realized that in the wintertime, they see him down in the desert. In the summertime, they see him up in the mountains where it's, nice and cool.
So he's migrating.
We think there's some sort of migration pattern going on if this thing happens to be real. But these reports go back like 300-400 years to the missionaries that were coming through there in the area. And there's also ghost lights. There's a lot of ghost lights through that area. There's ghost stories, UFOs galore. That's the contemporary stuff. There's a lot of UFO sightings, and we saw several while we were out there filming, along with government cover-up, which is interesting.
Ooh.
A lot of soldiers come in town and don't talk about this kind of thing, and people are real skittish. And the craziest thing of all of it is there's this antenna array in one of the dry lakes in the area. It's 4 square miles of just flat dirt. And back in the 50s and 60s, they ran an antenna array where they would shoot messages up into space and see if anything came back, essentially. So that ran for like 20 years, and then mysteriously one day they just decided to shut it down. So now we kind of wonder, were they sending signals and something got those signals and they're tracing it back to where they came from? And that's there in the Borrego Triangle, as we've termed it.
And where is that again?
It's about an hour east of San Diego. Yeah, it's out there in the middle of nowhere.
And you called it an area of high strangeness?
Yeah.
I love that.
High Strangeness in the Borrego Triangle is what we call the documentary.
And tell us again where everybody can find that, because now I need to go watch it.
Well, it's on Tubi. It's on Amazon. I think there's a couple other places. But if you go to borregotriangle.com, you can find basically anything there. A lot of fun. We almost died, so it was great.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Well, it was 122 degrees when we were shooting out there, so
no,
my
that's
gosh.
awful.
it was brutal. Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we reached out to you because of this video that you shared not long ago. It looked like a drone, or similar to a drone, at least, that a listener had sent to you, but it looked like it had kind of dangly legs that lit up. And it blew our mind because we got a very similar looking video, not the same one. It was from a totally different person from a completely different angle, but we said it had the hangsy downsies. It looked it even made a drone sound. It had this like kind of sound that you could hear. And in our video, it bounced off of something. It looked like it bounced off of a gate and went back and then tried again. Did you have any luck figuring out what that was?
Well, I'm going to burst your bubble.
No.
I saw your video as well, actually, and I think both of them are actually spider webs.
I don't think it's spider webs. I disagree heartily.
It's so hard for people to buy into that. Let me explain what I'm talking about here. So if a spider web's waving in the wind and it's caught any kind of moisture, and those little beads of moisture stick to that spider web, and those are highly reflective, water's highly reflective. So the IR camera from your door camera or whatever's filming shoots onto those beams of droplets
Moisture,
of water, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It shines onto that, reflects back, and that's what you're seeing is those little droplets on the spider web itself. So the telltale motion is the waving back and forth as the wind blows it. So mine, I'm 100% sure that's what it is. Yours, I'm 99% sure, because it does look a little weird, a little odd.
I'm like, but hold on. Ours at
freaky.
the end does this little like bink, like it tinks into something and then goes back in the other direction.
I
didn't notice that part, but I'll have to look at it again.
Maybe I'll send you the raw footage, because when we posted it, you can't hear the audio quite as well of the as it's coming in. And I
noticed that. I didn't hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this sound as it comes in, and you see the little things hanging down. And believe me, we have crushed so many people's paranormal dreams with the spider web thing, or that's a bug on your Ring camera. I'm very sorry. But this one, I still think it's a drone of some kind. I don't think it's paranormal. I'll send you the raw footage. But speaking of drones, you remember like right before the holidays, and I guess it's still happening a little bit, but there were so many of these drone sightings. Everybody was freaking out about the drones. Are they UFOs? Are we being invaded? What's going on? And we're not hearing about that quite as much. What do you think was happening there? I have a theory, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. The New Jersey drone flap of November and December of last year. Yeah. Essentially, there was just hundreds of drones every night. All these people in New Jersey would see them, record them, and every official, doesn't matter which administration, they're all saying it's nothing. These are just commercial drones or people playing around up there. There's nothing to be afraid of here.
Right.
If they're telling us not to be afraid, we should probably be afraid.
Yeah.
Now, as far as what those things are, I had the theory as it was going on that they were looking for something. The military has drones that can sniff nuclear weapons and that sort of thing. So maybe something came up missing and they know it's in New Jersey somewhere. So they at night throw all these drones out there and, hopefully they can sniff it out and find this thing. The weird thing about this, though, is this isn't the first time this has happened. Over the past year and a half, all over the country, there have been reports of drones shooting out this green grid. It's like a green laser grid. And it just zips across the ground real fast. I've got reports from it in Hawaii, Florida. I've had a lot of reports of that, and I've seen news reports from all over the country about the same thing, the green grid from these drones. But before even that happened, I want to say this was 2 years ago in Colorado. There was a drone flap there as well. All these huge, just like New Jersey, all these huge drones. Every night people are seeing them, catching them on camera. And they would ask officials, like, what are these? Are we in danger? And the officials are like, I don't know. I don't know what these things are, which is very comforting, right?
Sure.
So this isn't the first time, and something tells me it's not the last time. But my guess would be they found whatever they were looking for, and they've since moved on. But I don't think we've seen the last of them. I think they're going to be back.
What inspired you to get into the whole paranormal phenomenon? And do you have a personal story of your own?
Well, I can answer both of those with one story. When I was about 10 years old, I grew up in Ohio. Well, I grew up on a farm. I should start that, a really small hobby farm, but we had a lot of acreage. And as a kid, we would kind of go down in the woods and just explore around, as kids do. When we were down there, one of the first times we heard a crash on the other side of the hillside, and we all looked up, and there came this huge black cat, like a panther, just came running across the hillside, disappeared into the brush on the other end. And we're all just kind of looking at each other like, what is this thing? What is this? So we wait for my dad to get home from work. I couldn't wait to tell him. And, hey, we saw this down in the woods. And he's like, yeah, I saw that thing a couple weeks ago. And my first thought was, why are you letting us in the woods? Knowing that thing's down there.
Yeah.
I'm 10, my brother's probably 6 or 7, something like that.
Oh, man.
And then he goes on to tell me, well, your uncle had seen it 20 years ago and all this other stuff. So I started reading up on it. That was during the summer. So when school started again, went to the library and got all these books out. And I learned about this thing called alien big cats or alien black cats, essentially black panthers that live all over the eastern United States. And everybody denies that they're there, but people constantly. I have hundreds of calls describing these things. So that was sort of my gateway to get into all this. And that introduced me to Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, anything strange. I was on it. And that was just kind of the gateway drug for me to get started there.
Now, the Black Panther phenomenon, isn't that a thing in the UK as well?
It is, yeah. The UK is really heavily into it. Beast of Dartmoor is one that comes to mind.
Okay, so you've been doing this 10 years now. Mm-hmm. If you had to, can you pick your favorite, scariest story, the one that still keeps you up at night?
Yeah. I don't know how scary it is. It's just crazy. It's the craziest story I've ever heard in my life, and it just happened to be on my show. I got a call from a gentleman named Mac in Mississippi, and he was a deer hunter, and he had a deer stand out in the woods somewhere, so he went out. Didn't tell his family where he was going, of course. That's the classic mistake. But he's out there hunting, and he does something and falls out of his deer stand and breaks his back. So he lands on this big branch, and he's laying there all crippled and broken, and he thinks he's going to die. So he's laying there for hours, and he starts to hear these sounds and these big things moving toward him. Oh. And it's getting dark. The whole scenario is just a bad scenario all around.
Right.
And finally, he feels a hand up underneath his back kind of lift him up, and he's cradled by a Sasquatch, a female Sasquatch.
What?
And he can tell she's female, and she's like petting him and making cooing sounds, like trying to comfort him, it seems like.
Like motherly.
Motherly, of course, and it gets even more motherly. After a few minutes of that, she forces her breast into his mouth.
No.
And gives him milk.
Stop it.
And it's the craziest story. The craziest story. He sounds so believable when he tells this story. Season 9, episode 6, if anybody wants to check it out.
Yes, I do.
A breastfeeding Bigfoot lady.
Yeah.
Did he say what it tasted like?
He said god awful. Yeah. He said he spit it out. He said it was god awful, but she was insistent on doing this. And the only reason it all stopped is from the tree line, he heard a loud screaming, roaring sound that he knew was the male. And the male was not happy about what the female was doing. So she put him down and walked away. And later that night, his family came and found him. And he was in the hospital for a broken back for weeks. Now, was this a hallucination that he had due to pain? Possibly. Did he dream this as he was laying there practically dying in the woods? That's also a possibility. But the way he told the story and just the conviction in his voice, I believed every word he said.
And this is now also my favorite paranormal story ever.
Same.
And it's even weirder because over the years, I've heard of this happening other times.
No.
And there were people that were saying that there was some sort of healing element to the milk.
I was going to ask that. I was going to say, like, did somehow he get, like, all his bones were fixed and he was able to walk away after being breastfed?
That would have been awesome. Yeah,
Right?
really would have been awesome. Now, he did heal fairly quickly for a broken back. He said he was only in the hospital for a couple of weeks. So
Like Mega Milk.
maybe.
Is it
But
bad?
that lore is out there, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know where I read it at, and I've been looking for it ever since. So if somebody knows, reach out to me, let me know. But wildest story I've ever heard.
As soon as you said, though, a female Bigfoot showed up, I was like, were her boobs out? Like, clearly, it's like, how did he know it's a fake? Because her boobs are out.
Right?
So that it went there. I am completely, I am floored. That is the best thing I've ever heard in my life. I love the
It's
fact.
an amazing story. And he's actually called it in twice because the first time, every time I get a call from Mississippi, it's just a really bad quality call. And I don't know why. I don't know if they have bad towers down there or what's going on. But I reached out to him. I said, hey, like your story it's great story, but the recording's really bad. I can barely understand you. Can you call back? And from what I can hear, word for word is exactly the same. He's not reading a script. He's not doing anything like that. He's just telling his story.
So this feels like a good time for a call out. If anybody watching or listening has been breastfed by a lady Bigfoot, you have to let us know. And
Please.
yes, and I need a graphic description of what it
Same.
tasted like. I know it's bad, but like
Paint me a picture. Like, all of
100%.
it.
Derek Hayes, the podcast is Monsters Among Us, and tell us the name of your documentary.
It's Shadows in the Desert, High Strangeness in the Borrego Triangle.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Your stories
Of course.
are incredible. We love your podcast. And I tell you what, anytime you want to go on the road together, let us know. All right. We're talking about taking a trip to go try to find the Marfa Lights and do some stuff down
nice.
in Big Bend this upcoming November. So put that on your calendar if you want to come with.
Brilliant. I might, actually. I've never been to Marfa, and I really want to go. So
We've
that's
got
awesome.
a couple of things, Alpine, Marathon. We're talking about a few really spooky places out there. So we'll keep you posted. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much, Derek.
Of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Derek Hayes for joining us. We'll post the links to his show and website at hauntedaf.com. He also sent us the Bigfoot audio that he mentioned, which we are going to share on March 20th. So you absolutely must tune in for that.
Absolutely.
It's so good.
Don't forget that next week is going to be audio only as we revisit the early days of COVID and some of the best stories we've ever gotten. In the meantime, we want to hear yours. Send those ghost stories, cryptid encounters, UFOs, glitches, whatever you've got. Send it all to hauntedafpodcast@gmail.com so we can use them on the next Haunted AF.